At this point, we let it cool off for a moment. We reach for our tungsten pick or probe. The bead should be nice and firm, but not cold. Do some insurance heat, and then we're going to fine-tune the flame to give us pinpoint heat, and we're going to heat one zone at a time and press in with our tungsten to make a depression, and then we'll go on to another cell and do that all the way around 6 times, 6 depressions, not healing up the depressions at all, and then case each depression with a clear lens and then melt the whole thing in. So here we go. Bring heat onto cell number 1 and then press down. Sometimes you can kind of swivel the probe to make a deeper plunge. I usually rotate 180 degrees to train heat on a completely different part of the bead. And the longer you bring the heat onto the bead, the easier it is to press in. It takes a little experience to sort of figure out how much is enough. Should not be too hard to press in. And at the same time, you don't want to press that hard that you break the bead off the bead release either. When you do these beads one after the other, though, you kind of get the hang of it and you figure out what it takes to get the depression that you're after. You can also go back and just heat gently, maybe a cell that you think is getting too cold. You don't want to heat the old cells that have been depressed too much because you don't want to heal up, so to speak, that crater that you've created. You want a nice deep crater because that's going to be where the bubble goes. That's how you develop a bubble, because the air is going to get trapped. And the bigger the depression, the bigger the air trap. You can go back and replunge if you think it's necessary, but they're pretty brittle right now, pretty hard, so the replunging isn't going to do much. If you need to replunge, then you should reheat. So now we do some insurance heat way out, make the flame a little more bushy. This bead should be heated at the ends, though, to bring heat into the core without healing or sealing those depressions at all. Now we'll start to heat the clear casing that will go over each cell one at a time. So this is very similar to the process known as dot casing, except we're going to be doing dot casing right over these depressions. And because this mandrel, this cane had been cracked a little bit, and the optical quality on these cells is fairly important, I'm going to just pull off all of that bad. Put it into the water. Don't mind me. And going to tamp down the end of this cane, create a little flat depression, and now heat it, kiss it in the flame to get it kind of gooey again, and then stick it right on top of cell number 1. Now, I don't really mean cell number 1. I just mean the first cell that I attack. I don't know what is cell number 1 anymore, and it doesn't matter. So tamp down, create a little flat spot, get it liquidy again, choose another victim to land onto, and create an encapsulated cover, like a lens cover. In between, put some insurance heat into the bead, tamp down, heat up, and cap. And the longer you hold it there, the more glass mass is left behind, creating a larger lens cover. Heat up, tamp down, And I hope watching this, you out there in internet viewing land, appreciate all the handwork that goes into these handmade beads, and why it is that bead makers will charge 20, 30, 45, 50, 75, whatever it is, for their particular bead or bead style that they do. Because most beads involve this many, if not more, manual steps that are fairly precise and somewhat difficult to master. But you can do it. It just takes practice. And it's a lot of fun. And with bead making, there's really no bad results because the glass is so darn pretty to begin with. My first beads were very wonky and weird, but they were so beautiful to me because the translucence and the richness of the colors was so great. And so I found that very motivating, very inspiring to keep going and keep practicing hours a day, bead after bead, and you do progress. And the other really nice thing about bead making differentiates it from glass blowing in a furnace setting is that the bead making, the setup is relatively small and it's completely at your will. So you can set up your shop in a garage, someplace safe, with a cement floor, with proper advice again, and practice as much as you want. You come out, you turn the flame on, and it's going. You do a bead, you turn it off, you come back later, turn it on. So it's highly focused and specific. You don't have to usually keep much equipment running all the time, whereas glass blowers who use furnaces, they've got to keep furnaces on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't really tune it down. Now these bubbles are starting to melt in. We'll do it in incremental stages though. I'm going to pull back in a second, slow down my rotation, so you can see what magnificent result is happening. These weird sort of salmon egg eye bubbles are appearing, and they're magnified by virtue of the roundness of the lens covers. So that's... You could stop at any point. If you were going to stop at this raised point, though, you probably would want to pay more attention to each of the zones, each of the cells being equal in their sort of degree of protrusion. And I have not been careful about that. And to be honest with you, I often will melt down cells all the way, frankly, because you get a more uniform result. You don't have to pay as much attention to the exact size. It kind of all balances out in the wash. So the heating up and the melting down creates gorgeous symmetries that don't have to be so laboriously engineered. And on a philosophical note, that point, a lot of times the most beautiful beads I make are sort of beads where I'm not there, where my handwork is maybe less important, and it's been more about rotation and letting gravity and heat do their thing. That the gods of the glass world are speaking through me, and it's not as much that I'm doing all of this activity. Because there are certain powers of rotation, and the human mind and hand are wonderful, for sure, but there's other aspects of this creative process that really rely on physical forces that are beyond and outside of us. And harnessing those and knowing how they will act and impact the glass you're working on, in part that is one of the great secrets to becoming a masterful glass worker. Mastering those forces. And like I've mentioned in other segments, sort of becoming the midwife birthing these beads, channeling all the energies and the different laws of nature into creating these special little timeless orbs. A bead like this, could last 5,000 years, 10,000 years. And there's something kind of deep and interesting about that. So every time I make a bead, I have sort of a high standard for myself, and I want it to be just right because I recognize that there's a timeless aspect to what I'm doing. And this will be somehow a record of the stage of civilization that we're at. This bead is developing nicely, and the amber tones will get richer as it cools off. Its true beauty won't be evident until we actually take it out of the kiln either later tonight or tomorrow. So now I'm at the flame annealing stage, and this bead will be further interesting because it has a clear middle layer and a light green background. So you'll have a contrast of sort of red with amber with light green, and these cells will appear as if they're floating. And then the bubbles of air will shimmer out as well. So that's my third flame anneal. And I think we're done. Okay, so about 8-9 seconds for this into the kiln. And there's nothing that says you couldn't have, flattened it a little bit if you wanted to. And I'm going back into the heat just because I've been talking now. Keep it warm from cracking. But you could flatten it, make it more squat. And if you don't have an automatic programmer on your kiln, make sure to always stay attentive to what the temperature gauge says. In this case, I'm right on the money. I'm about 910, 920. So I can up the temperature about 20, 30 degrees. So I'm in the annealing zone of 940, 950. And that concludes this segment of plunging as a design technique.